Hello, everybody. My name is Logan Detmer, as you can see. I'm from just south of Fort Wayne, Indiana, so I'm new to the area. But I attend Bethel College, which is in South Bend. I'm sure some of you know where that's at. Wesley gave it a fist bump, so it must be good. And I'm actually interning at Colonial this summer, so I'll be there all summer along with Jonathan, who's here, and Chris as well. So if you're looking for somebody to hang out with this summer, we're there. We're open. But I get the opportunity to be your speaker today, and I guess I'm closing out the summer, so I'm supposed to give you some crazy wisdom or something. But we'll see how it goes. So I figured I would start off just kind of introducing myself and some parts of my life that are important to me and parts that dominate my life, I would say, in many ways. And so my first part of my life, this is my fiance Reagan. We get married in December, and so, yeah, young love, it's so cute. But yeah, and so she is someone that I spend a lot of my time with. It's someone that I care about, and it's someone that I've committed my life to grow in Christ alone, but also together, and be a God-honoring relationship. And so she is a crowd in my life. And so today what I'm going to talk about is the different crowds in our life. And so the crowds are just the type of groups that we spend all our time in. Whether it's the baseball team, or maybe you're a video gamer, that's a crowd you're a part of, or you're in the track team, or you are in band. But we're going to focus on crowds. And so as I introduce you to some of my crowds here in these few moments, I would also like you to think about the different crowds you yourselves are a part of. So the second part of the crowds is, this is just one half of my family. It's my mom's side. My dad's side is about 3 times bigger, and so but family is something that's near and dear to me. I care tremendously about my family, and my family is someone who has impacted me tremendously. And so they are a crowd in my life. They're people that I can be myself, I can show my heart, I can show my personality in this crowd. The next part of the crowd, these are my best friends. Same thing. People that have impacted me, they've shaped me, they've formed my personality, they've formed my heart. And so there's just a couple guys missing that are like really my best friends as well, but these are people that I spend a ton of time with. The next is kind of silly, but some crowds that I'm a part of. I'm a huge Chicago Cubs fan. I know up here it's mostly Tigers, but we won the World Series, so get over it. But I'm a huge Chicago Cubs fan, and that's a crowd in my life. And how my personality shapes in my life is how do I handle myself in the crowd of the Chicago Cubs. And then also, I'm a huge Indiana Hoosiers fan. I grew up doing that all my life. And notice the grunt, but I used the picture of the 5 banners for a reason. But we won't go there, because I'm not here. That's not what I'm here to do. But that is a crowd in my life. I spend a lot of time watching games with my friends, with my family. My fiance goes to Purdue, so she's a Purdue fan, but she'll get over that as well. And so these are crowds in my life. Now this is the last crowd that I want to talk about. This is the baseball team that I was a part of. I was actually a sophomore on this baseball team the year we won state. But this was a crowd where my personality was shaped not as well as I say it should have been. I was younger, I was hanging out with older kids, and so I wanted them to like me. And so this crowd shaped me and formed me in a way that was not positive. But actually as I got older and I was the senior on the team, it became a crowd where I could lead, and my personality was what it truly was. And so that's what we're going to look at today, is how crowds shape us and how we change from different crowds. So if we are a different person with our friends than we are with our family, or a different person with the baseball team than we are when we're playing video games online with other people, we don't want it to be that way. We want to be consistent in our personality. And so we're going to be looking at someone today who was not consistent at a time in his life in his personalities. And so we're going to look at Peter, and especially in Peter's denial in Luke. And Peter denies Christ in 3 different crowds, but then also in a 4th crowd, Peter is a leader, a spiritual giant. And in that crowd, people look up to him, but as he goes to these 3 other different crowds, he isn't the same Peter he is with the disciples. And so I'd like to read the story of when Peter denies Christ first as we go in today. So if you have your Bibles, I saw some of you carry it in. We're going to start in Luke 22, verse 54. Okay. Most of us are there, so here we go. So they arrested him and led him to the high priest's home. and Peter followed him at a distance. The guards lit a fire in the middle of the courtyard and sat around it, and Peter joined them there. A servant girl noticed him in the firelight and began staring at him. Finally, she said, "This man was one of Jesus' followers." But Peter denied it. "Woman," he said, "I don't even know him." After a while, someone else looked up at him and said, "You must be one of them." Peter retorted, "No, man, I am not." About an hour later, someone else insisted, "This must be one of them because he is a Galilean too." But Peter said, "Man, I don't know what you're talking about." And immediately, while he was still speaking, he heard the rooster crow. At that moment, the Lord turned and looked at Peter. Suddenly, the Lord's words flashed through Peter's mind. "Before the rooster crows tomorrow morning, you will deny 3 times that you even know me." And so, as we look at our story, we notice that Peter was among 3 different crowds in our story. And so the first crowd's with the woman, and then the other 2. But each time Peter's denying Christ. But also we see back in just a few verses earlier, Peter is with the disciples, and he's this leader. And Peter says that he is willing to die and go be with Christ. He's willing to lay his life on the line for Christ. But then, just the next chapter, we see Peter not do that in the midst of the crowds. And so, in this story, what's happening is Jesus is being taken to trial, and Jesus is following him. And so, likely, if Peter would have stood up and said, "No, Jesus is my friend, he's my brother, I'm his right-hand man," Peter likely would have been pushed into trial as well. He may have even been beaten or hurt or punished as well. And so, Peter let this fear that identifying with Christ would get him in trouble or would hurt him or burden him. And so that's what we're gonna tie into that, because we all have crowds. Like I said, we all have crowds that we are a part of. And so if you think about some of the crowds you're a part of, some of those crowds may be harder to take your faith into those crowds. And so luckily we don't have it as hard if we take our faith into those crowds. Likely we're not going to be thrown out and beaten or hurt. But a lot of the times it's hard because, like on the baseball team, I wanted to be included. I wanted to have friends and to be in relationship with these guys. And I had a fear, like Peter, that if I didn't go along with the jokes, or I didn't say the things they did, or did some of the things they did, they wouldn't include me. And it's false, and we see that. And so if you think of some of the crowds you're a part of, many of us are doing things to fit in, or to feel good, or to feel okay. In all reality, that's not what we're called to do. And so if we just look, that was our verse. And then, so this was our 22:33, right before. We can read through it real quick. It says, "Simon, Simon, Satan has asked to sift each of you like wheat. But I have pleaded in prayer for you, Simon, that your faith should not fail. So when you have repented and turned to me again, strengthen your brothers." Peter said, "Lord, I am ready to go to prison with you and even die with you." And so this was the verse I was talking about, where Peter acknowledges that he is ready to stand up for his faith for Christ. But then just a few instances later, he actually denies what he just said he would do 3 times. And so as we look at the crowds we're a part of, as I did myself, we should learn from Peter. Peter sets a standard. He gives us a wrong standard, but later on we see a good standard of what it means to take your faith into the crowd. And so what I want to touch on in our next point is this idea that we are to be ambassadors, representatives of Christ in every crowd of our lives. We're to be consistent. So how my personality and my heart is with my fiance should be the same with my family, the same with my friends, the same when I'm on the internet playing online, or the same at church. Our personality at church should not be different than our personality with our friend group. And so our second verse that I'd like to touch on is 2 Corinthians 5:20, which is up here. You can turn to it if you want. But it says, "So we are Christ's ambassadors. God is making his appeal through us. We speak for Christ when we plead, come back to God." And so if we are Christ's ambassadors, it means that Christ is using us to speak truth into others. And so when I go to a crowd and I leave my faith to the side and not take it into that crowd, I'm leaving Christ to the side and I am not being his ambassador. And so I'd like to define what being an ambassador actually means, because the definition places authority upon us. So an ambassador is defined as a diplomatic official of the highest rank sent by one sovereign state to another as its resident's representative. So ambassador isn't just some nobody who just gets to go carry out something, but it's someone who has importance, someone who has a calling. You're given a specific job and task to do this. And so we shouldn't take it lightly. We should take this authority upon us and take it into our crowds. And so I know that when I was on the baseball team, that I was not an ambassador for Christ. The moment I crossed the fence onto the baseball field, Christ stayed at the fence and Logan went onto the baseball field. Now I got into my senior year and I had this opportunity, and I started to pursue my call to God more, and God started to follow me onto the baseball field. And I saw how others saw a difference in me. They saw how much I cared more. They saw my different actions and my different heart and how I talked and stood up for things. And so if you think about some of the crowds you're a part of, think about ways that you show Christ's characteristics, or you show grace or peace, or you stick up for someone who's being teased, or you don't go along with the joke that someone told. Think about those moments and how those little moments are actually pieces that you are sharing of God. And so it's not just sharing the gospel, because that's a whole other animal, but being an ambassador is almost, in a sense, sharing our faith through our actions, or just how we carry ourselves in our own personalities. And so I would say that our second point is we are called to represent Jesus. Every single one of us has a different personality, has a different heart, but we all are called to do the same thing. And that is to represent Christ in our personality, in our heart, in our actions. And so, as we look at this and this idea, I had someone, going into my senior year, I had someone say something to me, and it was the idea that, what if you were the only Jesus people saw? And so if you thought about that for a moment, what if the only time someone experienced who Jesus was through your own personal actions? And so if you leave Christ out of one crowd and you don't take him into that, and you're doing something that is hurtful or harmful to someone, or you're not sticking up for something, that could be the only Jesus people see. And I don't know about you, that hurt me when that guy said that to me, because it's challenging and it's convicting, because it says, you aren't doing what I called you to do. And so when I think about this and I see this idea, it hurts, but it's true. We all have this opportunity to be the Jesus that we want people to see. And so when we're in these crowds and these different groups of people, you yourselves can help others see a Jesus that is accepting, that is standing up to things that are wrong or hurting. You can be the Jesus that is an influence to other people. And so if I had to finish that, you may be the only Jesus people see. And if I were you, I would write it down somewhere and keep it in my mind, because to me, it's changed my life and it's impacted me. And so, if you were the only Jesus people saw. So I would like you to take just a couple minutes in your mind, or if you write it, it'll help if you write it down for sure. I don't know if any of you brought pens or anything like that. But write down 5 crowds that you're a part of. Or think of 5 crowds that you yourselves are a part of. Okay. I'll take a couple people to just mention a crowd they would say they're a part of. Wesley.
My school.
Your school? Yes.
Church.
Church.
Baseball team.
Yeah. Basketball. Dan.
My family.
Yes.
Theater.
Theater. Good. Do I have any video gamers? Anybody that plays online? Or plays video games at all? Yeah. A video game is a platform we've been given to be a representative. How we talk or respond to something that's happening in the video game is as simple as being a representative in that. Anybody else? Alright. So, if you think, I hope that all of you thought of quite a few crowds that you're a part of. And I hope that if you look down that line, there may be a few crowds where you don't take Christ as deep into those crowds as you would like to. I know for me, even going through this lesson, I noticed times where I could have taken Christ more into it. And so as you think about that, I'd like us to think about those crowds. So if there's one crowd that comes to mind right off the bat when I say that, that's likely the crowd that you can take Christ into more today. And so I've got a video by, did anybody watch the AD Bible series on the History Channel? It was a few years ago.
Yes.
Part of it? Okay. Well, in that series, they show Peter's denial, but they show it as one instance happening at one time. But then Robbie Dawkins gives a little commentary to frame the mindset of what's happening with Peter here. And so we're going to watch this video real quick. Okay.
This scene with Peter is so painful and hard to see because I think we could all identify with it. As you look at this story and imagine here they had watched Jesus heal the sick. They watched Jesus take open wounds and close them. They watched Jesus mend bones. They saw these incredible miracles. I think this could have been one of the most confusing points in the disciples' lives.
You're one of his men.
No, he's here.
This man is one of the Nazarene men.
You're mistaken.
This man walks with the Son of God.
I do not. I don't know it. I've never seen him before. Take him away.
Now, the one who had just days before had this triumphal entry where people are waving these palm branches, crying out, Hosanna. They're sitting there thinking, this is the new candidate. This is the guy that's going to rule the nation. And now, the guy, they're assigning cabinet positions. Here's our guy. And now, here he is hanging on a cross, bleeding out, dying in front of the entire world. Of course, Peter is going to go, I was wrong. This isn't him. I've got a distance.